afternoon, everybody. Todd Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully, everyone's doing well. So, expect a lot of activity from not only the weather, but this channel as well, because things are getting pretty busy right now. Not just with severe weather, but also the tropics as well. There's three disturbances that we're watching, one of which is now a subtropical storm in the name of Patty. Patty made it all the way up to a 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm here as well. And the track with Patty is actually pretty interesting here. This is going to be heading towards Portugal and Spain by Tuesday here. This is going to be, of course, a post-tropical depression here, but I would still expect some heavy rain and high winds over towards the region here. This isn't going to be one of those catastrophic storms, but it's going to definitely be a nuisance for the area, and flash flooding definitely would be in the equation as well. There's not much known beyond what happens with this too, considering the fact that the environment for this area is just not very favorable. If we look over towards the other two areas, we'll go back real quick. We need to be very watchful of, in particular, Invest 97L, which has popped up right here. This is organized pretty quickly, as you can see over here with the satellite imagery on the top right corner. So, and we already know what happens when we usually see these pop up here. This usually works its way into the Gulf and becomes an issue. So if you're on the Gulf Coast right now, not necessarily time to ring the alarm, but definitely pay attention to this. There's also another feature over here we'll have to watch. And an interesting scenario has been playing out on some models here. I'm not really going to go too far into detail with that, considering the fact that it's still pretty variable. Only a handful of models have this even developing as it is. But if it does, a Fujiwara effect could come into play here. But in any case, though, we have three systems to look at here, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at the environment as a whole over the Atlantic. So one thing that works against Patty right now is the fact that there's a lot of wind shear that's going to be on the eastern side of the storm. This does clear out. However, if you look on this screen here, which is looking at the sea surface temperatures, once you get below 20 degrees Celsius, it's not the best environment for the tropics here. You really want to be more towards, like, I would say 23 to 25 degrees Celsius. It's towards that 80-degree threshold. Really, I would say about 26 to 27 is really good environment. But yeah, once you get towards that 20-degree range, you're like at maybe 70 degrees Fahrenheit, if you're lucky. Because there's a little bit of variance with the Celsius to Fahrenheit conversion here. But in any case, though, waters are pretty cool over here, and this will help keep the storm kind of slow. But the environment over towards Portugal and Spain, I couldn't get the word out, is actually pretty moist. So it's going to help sustain the storm for just a little bit longer, but we expect this to pretty much remain subtropical and then go extratropical, or aka post-tropical here. Looking at the rest of the environment as a whole here, though, you can see that Invest 97L tries to ramp up a little bit here. The ensembles don't always do a great job with the intensity here, but it's definitely something that we still need to keep an eye on. There is some good news to this, though, and it's the fact that the wind shear is still going to be a factor over towards this region over the next week. So it'll help keep the storm a little bit weaker. And then, of course, as we mentioned before, waters over towards the Gulf, not quite as hot as they were, let's say, towards the beginning of hurricane season, but still, waters are more than warm enough to sustain tropical development. So could strengthen rather notably, but I wouldn't expect a major hurricane out of this, I'll put it that way. Big inhibiting factor might actually be dry air here. Now, this is us switching over to the GFS ensemble to look at our relative humidities at mid-levels. And as you can see, there's going to be some dry air on the west side, which is also going to be a big inhibiting factor as well. As you can see also, the GFS operational run is also showing this other feature coming into play here. Now, this is where things kind of get interesting, because if this comes into play, then we might have an issue with maybe two storms coming into play for Florida and a flood threat really starting to ramp up over there. We've already had enough problems with Florida this year. Let's hope that these two end up ultimately leaving the state alone. But in any case, though, as a whole, when we look at the tropics in general, after we deal with Patty, things start to quiet down a little bit. The wind shear also starts to kind of take over as we get further along into the month here. We still, of course, have to watch the Caribbean. I think that's going to be the main point of interest for the rest of hurricane season. Towards the main development region, we're just about locked down at this point. Dry air is also kind of indicating that a bit as well, especially as we get further along here. There are a couple areas where we get some good moisture, but it's still pretty questionable. But between the combination of wind shear and dry air, I think that our time with hurricane season is coming to an end pretty quickly here. Now, as we look at Invest 97L's model guidance here, there are, well, pretty much all of these are indicating that this will become the next named storm, which would be the name Raphael. There are a couple of these that do want to push it to a hurricane, but it doesn't stay at that intensity for long. So there's some good news to be had there. As we go further along, I'll have more confidence as to whether or not this is true. So we'll be making update videos on this accordingly. But for right now, in regards to 97L, the biggest thing that I'm paying attention to right now, of course, as we mentioned before, is the track. Almost every spaghetti model plot that I've looked at right now has been pushing this towards the Gulf Coast. Just where on the Gulf Coast is the question. Some are pushing this towards New Orleans and Louisiana. Of course, this isn't, like I said before, not expecting this to be a major storm by any stretch of the imagination. But rainfall and wind will definitely be a factor. Tornadoes are also possible if we do end up indeed getting a landfalling storm. But spanning all the way from New Orleans all the way towards the Big Bend, we could have some impacts here from this storm, or I would say direct impacts. I think regardless, we're going to end up having rip currents, and Florida itself still is going to get rainfall to some degree from this, regardless of where this particular system ends up tracking. So a lot to keep track of. How many times did I say the word track? But anyway, though, a lot of weather to go around here, a lot to talk about on the channel. Expect potentially some days where we'll have 2 videos, maybe even more. But appreciate you guys for still being here. Thanks for watching the video. I'll see you guys a little bit later today for a live stream with severe weather in the Western High Plains. Until then, take care and have an awesome rest of your Saturday.